Next week, we meet Cliff in London, with more highlights from Cliff Richard's very successful season on stage last year, in which he featured some of the early hits from the 50s and 60s, including Living Doll and The Young Ones, as well as more recent songs. Cliff in London on BBC1 at 8:15 next Friday.
Next Tuesday on BBC1, Omnibus presents Stevie Wonder, Inner Visions, a film profile of the blind American singer.
People, keep on running. Soldiers, keep on running.
To me, like listening back to the stuff that I do is like warming up.
Right.
You have to warm up and you have to say, well, this is what was wrong with that at a particular time. Also, like, I listen to song Visions or any songs that I've done in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to them to see if emotionally I feel the same way.
A boy's born in hot town Mississippi. Somebody back for one that ain't so pretty. His father works some days for 14 hours, and you can bet he barely makes a dollar. His mother goes to scrub the floors for Minnie, and you best believe she hardly gets a penny. Living just enough for the city.
Stevie Wonder, Inner Visions, the Omnibus presentation next Tuesday at 10:40 on BBC1.
And now here's Barry Took with some more of your points of view.
Good evening. We've had a really mixed bag of letters this week. For instance, we received this from Mrs. Pat Morris of Maidenhead.
After last night's syrupy episode of MASH, I think it should be renamed Mush.
And M.M. Webster of Fulwood has this to say.
We're not interested in the perishing panda's love life. No more bulletins, please.
And from pandas to darts, Neville Gurnhill of Skegness wrote on St. David's Day.
England were getting soundly beaten when commentator Tony Green said, "St. David will be proud of his lads tonight." I do hope this is not going to become a trend. Where would it end? Terry Wogan's script by St. Patrick, the AA and RAC personally recommended by St. Christopher, the weather forecast presented by St. Swithin.
Most appropriate.
By the way, who is the patron saint of letter writers?
You know, I don't know. For those who write to us and don't get their letters read, I should think it's St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. But now from religion to royalty, and Arthur P. Cox of Alton in Hampshire.
I was very interested to see in Part 8 of the Royal Heritage programme that in the sequence in which Prince Charles talked while in a rowing boat, that His Royal Highness appeared to be wearing an acoustic sporran.
An acoustic what?
Sporran.
Oh.
Is it designed so that should the wearer fall into the water, it will float to the surface and emit loud cries of Scots wahey? On the other hand, is it designed for dry land operation, so that when switched on, it will give a continuous programme of bagpipe music?
I think it's more likely to be repeats of the Goon Show. It is, of course, possible that the sporran was bugged. A thought I shan't dwell on. Instead, I shall move briskly on to Nanny. M.J. Tufnell of Abergavenny wrote on March the 8th...
Dear Barry Took, Nanny. That programme on Saturday night was absolute trash. I've been a nanny for 30 years and spent a very happy and rewarding life. But never have I met such situations as your scriptwriter seems to dream up. It was all very disappointing.
But not so, says Rosalind Healy, also writing on the 8th. She says...
Wendy Craig gives a superlative performance. Her sensitivity over the character, so beautifully portrayed, shows all the time and effort she must have put in to study that tower of strength, the British nanny. How really moving it was to watch her handling the babies so lovingly and so carefully, and then to see on her face the extreme tiredness when again, yet again, the baby starts to cry.
Well, Mrs. Healy tells me that she's had 5 sons and clearly speaks from experience. Mr. Robert Leighton of Newport Pagnell would consider Mrs. Healy lucky to have seen the expression on Wendy Craig's face. He writes...
Could you please explain to me, Barry, why this had to be in the dark from beginning to end? One could hear lots of voices and sometimes see movements in the gloom. The only time one could see faces was if they went outside. Is the BBC trying to save money on electricity?
Well, no, it's a little thing called atmosphere. But many of you have written making the same point, including Brian Keeble of Shrewsbury, Lyndon Evans of Wrexham and Mrs. Kinloch of Bristol. Well, the last word on the subject of nanny goes to Mrs. Vera Pearmain of Ilford.
Surely no nanny would work in houses full of nutcases as Nanny Gray had to in last Saturday's episode. She was fast becoming one herself. Thank goodness next Saturday is the last. She would never have survived another episode, nor would we.
It never ceases to amaze me how many different opinions can be held on the same subject, and this includes the professional critics as well as we ordinary viewers. When everybody does agree, there's either something universally awful about a programme or something totally delightful. Well, this week, or today in fact, the Broadcasting Press Guild announced their awards for 1980. The Broadcasting Press Guild are those critics, columnists and reporters who spend their time watching and commenting on television programmes or listening to and commenting on radio. And as usual, the BBC has won the majority of prizes. Best play in 1980, say the Press Guild, was Caught on a Train, and Peggy Ashcroft, who starred in it, was voted Best Actress. Best Actor award went to Nigel Hawthorne, and the Best Comedy prize was won by Yes Minister. Robin Day, I beg his pardon, Sir Robin Day, also won a prize, and the award for the Best Drama Series or Serial went to Serve Them All My Days. Well, judging from our correspondence, To Serve Them All My Days is a worthy winner. We had hundreds and hundreds of letters praising the series, which only goes to show the critics do know almost as much about television as the viewers. Well, our congratulations to all concerned, and to celebrate the victory, here is a moment from To Serve Them All My Days.
Ah, there you are, David.
I'm sorry I wasn't there to meet you. Would you like to come up to my study now?
Things are a bit tricky at the moment, David. There's too many people about. Everybody's watching everyone else. We don't want people talking about a Havelock's House conspiracy.
Is that what we are, then?
I'm afraid it's very serious, David.
What is?
Your position here, that's what.
Pilot Jones wasn't in assembly this morning.
No? Oh, no, I believe you're right.
Do you happen to know where he was?
Alas, no, Headmaster. For myself, I should be very loath to miss an assembly. It isn't just a question of responsibility. Frankly, Mr. Alcock, over the last year, your assemblies have been a great source of pleasure to me.
Thank you, Hythe.
But now from prizes to brickbats. Mrs. Veronica M. Long of Bournemouth writes,
Dear Barry Took, reference Levin on Figaro. This was an interesting programme with fascinating excerpts and comparisons. But please, Mr. Levin, watch your Italian pronunciation. There is nothing cosy about così van tutti. Ciao.
And ciao to you too, Mrs. Long, and bad boy Bernard. On the subject of last Saturday's BBC2 epic offering of Mozart, Catherine Kendall of Sevenoaks writes,
I thoroughly enjoyed The Marriage of Figaro, but was puzzled by my sense of déjà vu in the bedroom scene, where the philandering, jealous husband was accusing his supplicating wife of having a lover. Then I realised why. It was old J.R. and Sue Ellen all over again. You must admit Larry Hagman's throaty ha-ha-ha bears the vestiges of an operatic laugh.
I suppose it does, but have you caught his singing? Anyway, Kate Kendall concludes her letter.
So there really is no new thing under the Dallas sun.
No, but the sublime Mozart does go on forever, to loud applause. Miss J.M. Beer of Warnford, Hampshire, says of Figaro,
The opera was superb, the cast were wonderful.
And Mrs. D. Razor of Newbury Park adds,
Among many enchanting voices, that of Kiri Te Kanawa as the Countess seemed to have a special magic, which with her beautiful and expressive face made for an unforgettable performance.
Elizabeth Gilliatt of London West 1 feels,
It was a wonderful experience. Words simply cannot describe how marvellous was the production.
Well, Mrs. Gilliatt asks me to
Pass on to those responsible our warmest thanks for the pleasure we have enjoyed.
consider them past, Mrs. Gilliatt. Mrs. M. Sutherland of Wembley speaks for many when she says,
It was truly a wonderful, sublime experience to hear the artistry of the cast of internationally great opera singers, and their acting in this superb production was sheer delight to watch. Thank you, BBC2, 1,000 times.
Mrs. Gillian Russell of Cleator, Moor, Cumbria, says simply,
Figaro fantastico, encore, encore.
Well, I would go on, but I hear the producer shouting, Tuca, shut up or you face! And so I press swiftly on to Open All Hours. Hardly Mozart, but splendid in its way, as Mrs. Carol Corn of Stoke Poges indicates.
It was a pleasure to receive Open All Hours back on the television on Sunday.
And Mrs. C. Hoyle of Blackpool says of Open All Hours,
I laughed from start to finish. Ronnie Barker must be the very best comedy actor on TV.
and few would argue with that. Mind you, Ellie Bell of Epsom complains of Ronnie,
Making fun of those unfortunate people who have a speech defect, that is, stammering.
Well, Mr. Bell adds,
I know from experience that stammerers do not enjoy fun being made of them, and I think it's in extremely bad taste to make a so-called comedy programme which involves this most inhibiting ailment.
Well, S. Pinsey of Darlington makes the same point, but Simon Carnell of Sheffield, Lee Hibbard of Bridgend, and Etty M. Saywood of Braintree all love it. So does Miss E. Took of London North West 8 come to that, and her father. So for all of us Barker and Jason fans, here's a moment now from Open All Hours.
You know, when I think of the tights that's been through my fingers,
It's about time I had one with a leg in it.
Granville, you're always the same, you are, of a morning, full of desperate talk. I reckon it's the fluoride they put in the toothpaste. I think it's imbalancing your hormones a bit. Or maybe you're not quite regular enough with your shaving. My advice to you at times of stress is to always go and spit polish your boots. Hey, put the kettle on, would you? All right. You know, you've been a constant worry to me, Granville, ever since you first went into a Y fronts. The secret of an orderly life, in my opinion, is to always leave yourself relaxed around the premises. Here. 432 beige.
Oh, finally this week, this letter from Leeds.
So many programmes seem to rely on us, the general public, to supply the laughs, the funny experiences, the tragedies, etc.